It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the For-Friend Formula One podcast. You have myself, Ben, you have J9, you have Matt, and you have Josh. We are relatively new Formula One fans. We're probably somewhere in there. We knew about the sport, but we're kind of in the new swervive. We're in that new kind of fandom, that American fandom. It is blowing up. It kind of gave us the idea a little bit to get into this podcast. And we know that there's a lot of new fans out there alongside with us. Thank you for tuning in, joining us in this journey. We are happy to be your guides. And we're going to do that. We're going to start off doing that in this episode. This will be the first episode of what we're going to call the F101 series, kind of give you all of the information, all of the lowdown on one of our favorite sports, how it works, how it came to be, all of that good stuff. This is Formula One's 75th year. It is a grand anniversary. It is a great time to get into the sport. It is as competitive as it has ever been. So if you are new, don't be scared. We are friendly. We don't bite. We're just fans. We love watching speedy cars do speedy things. So if you're new, this episode is going to be great for you. This episode specifically is going to be very high level, just kind of give you the very quick facts about Formula One. And we'll put out, as the season goes on, we'll put out more of these F101 episodes, diving a little more detail into some of the main points of the sport. And then by the end of the season, you're going to have dropped $1,000 in merch. You're going to be a diehard fan waking up in the middle of the night to watch the races that happen on the other side of the world. So we're glad you picked us for this journey. With that, I'm going to get right into it. I'll keep kicking us off since I like hearing myself talk. So Formula One, why is it called that? That's an interesting name for a sport. So the formula is literally the name of the rule book for the sport. And this rule book says, what car size you have, what your engine has to be, how much money you can spend, how many batteries you can use over the whole season. All of the rules in Formula One are the formula. It got the name Formula One because it was the pinnacle of this motorsport. It still is one of the pinnacles of motorsport racing in the world today. And as I mentioned, it's the 75th season. So we've come a long way. It's one of the coolest sports because it used to be that the fastest cars would go 60 miles an hour and then 100 miles an hour and then 150. We are well over 200 mile an hour top speeds. It is lightning quick on the track for the drivers. It is lightning quick for the teams making strategy decisions, making mathematical calculations, designing their car, all of that. It's super scientific. It's super energetic. It's super thrilling. And that's why we love Formula One.
Yeah, so let's start with some basics. The teams and drivers. Obviously, it's a sport. We're competing against each other. So there's 10 teams in Formula One, each having two cars, two drivers. So there's 20 drivers on the grid in total. Starting in 2026, we're actually getting an 11th team. Cadillac is joining the fold. So that'll be the first time since 2016 that there's going to be an 11th team. But for now, 10 teams, 20 drivers, 2 cars per team. That's how it works. The F1 calendar typically goes the season from March to December with 24 races across the season. And these races are all over the world. And there's a variety of tracks. You have some street circuits where you're driving through the city streets like Monaco. You have traditional road courses like Silverstone. And then you have a few night races also on some tracks throughout the season. Usually early in the year is within the Middle East, Australia, East Asia, and a little bit in Europe. Mid-season is the European summer, as it's called, where you go all around Europe, a lot of races back to back. And then late season, the focus shifts to the Americas, followed by a return to the Middle East for the season finale. And in the middle of the season, there's a summer break, a mandatory break that's usually 3 or 4 weeks. And it lets everybody reset, recharge, take a break. Everyone goes on vacation.
Us included,
yeah. And the teams aren't allowed to upgrade their cars during this time. So everyone has to take a break, step away, and they get back feeling rejuvenated and refreshed for the second half of the year.
Absolutely. And this is so alongside with what you're mentioning, Josh, where there's two drivers per team, 10 teams, soon to be 11. they also compete differently than a lot of other sports. So normally in the sports we're used to here in America, a team wins a championship, and they have that. That's the Constructors' Championship. We have that in F1, and it's given to the team with the most combined points. But the drivers actually compete with each other, and that leads to interesting dynamics. There's no prize necessarily for winning the Drivers' Championship, but you can get a lot of money for winning the Constructors' Championship. So that's what teams are really fighting for, and that's where it's a lot of the money and benefits come from having a level team with two good drivers consistently, and neither one of them has to win the actual Drivers' Championship for them to win the championship themselves. Each race, for the most part, there's a pretty standard structure. We've got some other sprint races that we'll get into at another point. But for all of the main races, you've got first place gets 25 points, and then going down, only the top 10 drivers will score. So from 25, it then goes to 18, 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and then 1. So big point differences, but anything past 10 is basically, you just call it even. And then for those sprint races, the top 8 drivers will score. It's a smaller point system, but again, we'll get into that later on.
Yeah, and once you get into the race, it's a little bit interesting and different than a lot of other sports. They look at 3 different kind of parts of what we call race weekend. You start out with the first day is practice day. So you're going to have 2 practice sessions typically where teams will test their cars. How's it working? It might be really hot. It might be rainy. It might be super cold. And that's going to affect different things about the car that you would change, your tires, or you might set up different fuel loads. A lot of specifics that might be more along the engineering side of how you're going to do your car. And then for the drivers, how is that car actually doing on the track? So you do some practice rounds. Then Saturday, typically the second day, but it might be, maybe depending on the race, it might be a different day of the week, but typically Saturdays, your qualifying session. So that's every driver is going to go and race along the track and try to get a good seed, good position on the grid for the actual race event. So where are you starting in the 1 to 20? You're going to go and try to qualify with a really fast time. Then the main event, which we call the Grand Prix, is the actual race where the points are going to be awarded. So right after qualifying, once you get your position for the start, you can't do anything to the car, like no upgrades, no nothing. You are set for the race. You got to go into that race day ready to go. And then throughout the race, like again, weather can impact things, track conditions can impact things. So it's going to be kind of you have your pit crew, the engineers as well, trying to make sure that the car is going to perform. And so you're going to do different things. And that's where a lot of strategies come into play with getting new tires and how the car is set with fuel and other things that we'll get into in other episodes. And especially when crazy things happen during races, we'll review that as well. And I think it's really interesting. This is a sport that people go to watch. And it's different than being maybe in a stadium or arena where you're seeing it all. Like maybe you're in the top level, or maybe you're in the bottom level of an arena and you can, see the players closely, or you're seeing the whole thing from a bird's eye kind of view. This is a little bit different. So race weekend, people are going to the track. They're eating food, they're drinking drinks, they're having a good time with everything set up, they're buying merchandise. Then you go and you sit in a seat and you're at a turn. And it's not like a circle like NASCAR would be. Every track is different. So you're at turn 3, you're at turn 8. You're on a big stretch that's just a flat line. And so you see different parts of the race, and you're looking on all the TVs around you trying to see what's happening at the other turns. But it's very fun as those cars zoom by, sometimes over 200 miles an hour. And it's very exciting, and really you get the thrill of racing. So that's a good breakdown of like what the drivers are going through, and then really what the fans are going through, what we're seeing.
Absolutely. And it's, as you can tell, we love Formula One. There's a lot of different things to pay attention to in Formula One. But of course, if you're going to pay attention to one thing, the moneymaker, if you will, those are the races. As J9 was talking about, as she said, they're also known as Grands Prix, or a Grand Prix singular. This is pretty much always on Sunday, except for a couple Saturday nights. We're on the East Coast of the United States. We're in Atlanta. Some of the times are favorable, some of them are not, depending on where in the world they are. But the races are really what matters. It's where you score points for your championships. It's where the glory of winning a race and getting soaked in champagne happens. And there's a couple guidelines, but one of the most important things that J9 hit on is this is not NASCAR. This is not round tracks. The reason there's a championship, the reason there's a long season is every track is different. Some are on streets versus an actual track, like Josh said. Some are at night, some are during the day, some are in the sun, some are during the rain. But they all have different turns and twists and elevation changes and all of that makes each race worth watching. So the guideline for a race is that each race is however many laps it takes to complete 300 kilometers driving, which is a lot, but these cars are going so fast that this works out well for American sports fans. Formula One races are capped at 2 hours long. So it's a quick sport. It's an easy sport to watch because all 10 teams, all 20 drivers are all competing at the same time in one place on the track. So you really get the full layout. But like I said, each track is different. Spa, which is the Belgian Grand Prix track, there's only 44 laps required to hit 300 kilometers. Zandvoort, the track for the Dutch Grand Prix, is 72 laps long. It's the shortest track. And so you really get a different vibe, a different feel. And some teams and some drivers are better at certain tracks than others. So it's always interesting. There's always difficulty in being dominant because you have to prepare for so many different situations. The one other big thing, and we will talk about this a lot more in another episode, is pit stops. You've heard about pit stops. You've maybe even seen a pit stop, but pit stops and strategy are what make races fascinating. Even though it's just the drivers on the track, these teams are made up of thousands of employees, engineers, strategists, all the way up to business people making split-second decisions to make sure that their driver completes the track faster than somebody else on another team does. And that involves pit stops. There's a required pit stop in every race, and it plays into the strategy of how you use your tires, which is another thing to look forward to in another episode. There's so much to talk about in Formula One. We want to break it all down, but we're going to do so in F101 in bite-sized chunks so you can learn as we go through the season. And soon enough, you'll be like, oh, I remember hearing that in that F101 episode. Oh, I know to look for this the next race I watch. So that's how it's going to work. That is the most high level, the most basic way we can describe Formula One. It is an incredibly exciting sport. I only got into the sport about 3 years ago, and it is already one of my favorite sports. I host watching parties almost every race at reasonable times. It's super fun. It's super exciting. And like I said, Formula One is ever changing. Teams are upgrading. Tracks are changing. All of that. So you want to tune in as much as you can on TV during the races, and then before and after each race during this season, tune in with us on the Low Downforce podcast. We do preview and review episodes for every single race all season long. And then just like this F101 episode, we sprinkle in some goodies for you as well. But we edge closer and closer to the season starting. Get ready for it. Get excited for it. If you're new to the sport, buckle in. Check us out on all of our socials at Low Downforce Pod. Leave a comment. Is there something specific that you want us to make an F101 episode about that you're really interested in that we didn't cover here or we don't cover in upcoming episodes? Please let us know. These are for you to get into the sport as addicted as we are. So we will talk to you in the next one. Until then, stay speedy. Goodbye.